Con number 4, biofuels. A friend of mine drives around to restaurants late at night and collects used vegetable oil. He uses it in his diesel Mercedes that will qualify for Medicare next year. He has converted the Mercedes to burn vegetable oil as fuel. Quick side note, the very first auto mechanics class I ever took, my teacher had converted his Jetta to biofuel. It was a diesel, and he went around to fast food restaurants and they would give him the grease from all the fried food, and he would clean it and strain it and pour it straight into his car. It was pretty cool. Let's see here. One of the solutions to the carbon crisis is biofuels. Biofuels are essentially fuels produced from plants. There are 2 basic types of biofuels. Ethanol, which can be used as petrol and is made from corn, sugarcane, beets, wheat, and other grains. As actually a lot of things you can make ethanol from. Prickly pears, I live out here in the desert. That's one way to do it. There's actually endless ways to do it. You just have to do some research on it. I haven't thoroughly looked into it. And biodiesel, which is made from oil seeds, tree nuts, or waste oil. Another quick side note, there's a pretty cool documentary called Pump. I will link it in the description box. It talks about the oil industry, how it started, how they have taken over and corrupted everything, and it goes over various different types of fuels. This article I have here doesn't appear to know that hemp is an option. I can't recall if the documentary talks about hemp or not, but hemp can be used for lots and lots of things, such as fuel, hempcrete, which is like concrete, clothing, paper. Really, the list is endless, but that's for another time. Maybe I'll do a whole video on it, actually. I will continue reading. Biofuels are supposed to be clean, convenient, and carbon neutral. But don't look too closely because the environmental consequences of their use are something out of a Stephen King novel. Deforestation. The Earth's tropical rainforests are being obliterated as if some friendly, jolly green giant were running an immense weed whacker through the Amazon. Biofuels are broadly promoted as a solution to the production of carbon dioxide, but a closer examination reveals that they damage the environment on 2 fronts. The first is massive planetary, earthly deforestation. Tropical forests are the most powerful carbon reservoirs on the planet. In other words, they sequester and store carbon dioxide more effectively than any other resource. Cutting forests down not only releases massive amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, it eliminates them as both a carbon reservoir and a generator of oxygen. Again, for those of you that slept through high school biology, or, like me, never had the guts to take it, plants use carbon dioxide and sunlight to make oxygen. I gotta interject another quick side note. They're not only cutting down forests for wood and fuel and all that, they are clear cutting to make way for big agri. They are cutting down massive amounts of forests to make way for cattle. Cattle produce methanol. Methanol is a huge problem. Meat consumption is a huge problem. But again, for another time. But government mandates and corporate greed are pushing the cultivation of biofuels so intently that tropical forests are vanishing from the planet at an appalling rate. The European Union, for instance, has mandated a 20% reduction in carbon emissions by 2020. This is to be partly achieved by mandating that 10% of vehicles be powered by biofuel. Financial incentives which we examine in detail below, have driven global investment in biofuels from $5 billion in 1995 to an estimated $100 billion in 2010. Everyone from George Soros to British Petroleum and Shell Oil are players in this market. As a result, vast amounts of the Amazon rainforest in Brazil have been destroyed for soybean and sugarcane cultivation. Brazil proudly announced last year that deforestation was on track to double that year. A report by Friends of the Earth revealed that between 1985 and 2000, the development of palm oil plantations in Malaysia was responsible for the deforestation of 87% of the country's forests. 87%. In fact, palm oil is now referred to as deforestation diesel. And not to mention all of the animals it is wiping out, and this is really bad. In Sumatra and Borneo, 4 million hectares of forest were lost to palm oil farms. 9.8 million acres, almost twice the size of New Hampshire. As an added sucker punch to Mother Nature, biofuel-driven deforestation has also led to Holocaust-like species extinction. The forests in Malaysia and Indonesia are home to the orangutan, Sumatran rhinos, tigers, gibbons, tapirs, proboscis monkeys. Oh, never heard that. Don't know how to pronounce it. And thousands of other species, many of which are under serious threat of extinction from habitat loss. And then there is this troubling little fact. While biofuels generate less carbon emissions than oil, they are doing so by replacing vegetation and soil that suck up even more carbon. In other words, the carbon absorption lost by raising the wilderness to cultivate biofuels is dramatically more than the gains achieved by using the cleaner burning fuels. The inconvenient truth is that the biofuel craze is destroying nature and, incidentally, adding to the carbon dioxide on the planet, not decreasing it. Ocean pollution and dead zones. If you have ever walked by a body of water and noticed an acrid smell, felt your eyes burning, or saw that it was blanketed by a thick red, blue, or green plant covering, you've probably had an unfortunate run-in with an HAB, harmful algae bloom. I pronounced unfortunate wrong, I just realized that. In almost all cases, the production of biofuels is accompanied by the use of nitrogen, phosphorus, herbicides, pesticides, insecticides, etc. Nitrogen, along with other toxic materials, filters downward to the water table and finds its way to rivers, streams, and eventually the ocean. There, the nitrogen and, to a lesser degree, the pesticides generate massive, abnormal, and very toxic algae blooms, which rapidly decay into huge areas of oxygen-sucking dead algae. This is highly destructive of marine life. Corn cultivation utilizes the greatest application of fertilizers and pesticides. No surprise, then, that the heaviest concentration of these toxins occurs in the U.S. Corn Belt. The result? Nitrogen and other toxins in the Mississippi River system have mercilessly poured into the Gulf of Mexico, creating a dead zone of 22,000 square kilometers, 8,492 square miles, an area about the size of New Jersey. It's not just the Gulf of Mexico. The number of oceanic dead zones has spread around the planet, around the Earth, like an environmental cancer. Since the onset of the biofuel craze in the 1980s, the number of dead zones has increased 450%. But that's not all. Species extinction. There are currently about 405 dead zones on the Earth, the largest 70,000 square kilometers, which is 27,020 square miles, larger than the state of West Virginia, in the Baltic Sea. Species extinction is a direct effect of these zones. In the last 10 years, 14,000 dead seals and dolphins have washed up on California's coast, and 650 gray whales have been found beached. They could be breached. They could be dead, upside down. I don't know. In Florida, hundreds of manatees have been killed, and 80% of the coral reef in the Caribbean has been smothered. 75% of California's fish-rich kelp forest has been ruined, and the problem is beginning to affect the availability of seafood for human consumption. About 1.7 million plant and animal species have been identified on the Earth. According to some reports, species extinction is now occurring at the rate of about 20,000 to 30,000 annually. Whatever the number, the endangered species list increased 150% last year alone. The single largest reason for this habitat destruction and pollution, most of which is a result of biofuel production. Makes you feel warm all over, doesn't it? Oxygen depletion. I don't know about you, but I've grown rather partial to breathing. It brings a certain awareness to life. So the fact that biofuel production is depleting the Earth's oxygen is more than a little troubling. Sounds alarmist, doesn't it? Perhaps even a bit conspiratorial. I'm having a hard time tonight. How could one of the most prolific solutions to global warming be destroying the Earth's supply of oxygen? The oceans are the Earth's largest carbon sink. The rainforests are the most effective carbon sinks. Oceans are the largest. It is the algae in the oceans that absorb the bulk of the Earth's CO2. That's right, the Earth's primary CO2 sponge is the algae in the oceans. The algae then convert sunlight and the CO2 in the ocean into oxygen. 70 to 80% of this Earth's oxygen is produced by algae in the oceans. Yet the nitrogen, phosphates, and other chemicals pouring into the oceans around the world as a result of biofuel production are destroying the very element that produces the bulk of that oxygen, the algae in the oceans. This is con number 4. Biofuels don't reduce carbon. They destroy the rainforests and are depleting the very air we breathe. Which begs the question, have these people forgotten to pay their brain bills, or are they just plain evil? Or is there something else at play here? And that brings us to the last piece of the puzzle and final con. One thing I forgot to mention, when I read last year or whatever in these sections of this paper, I just want to make note that I cannot find the date or the year that this was written, but it clearly wasn't that long ago, so the numbers about the animal extinction and all this shit is probably a lot higher now. So I just wanted to throw that out there as a little mini disclaimer.